That's 2% of the population. It's 1 in 50, so it's not much different from the... But most of those kids, despite their temperamental proclivity to be aggressive, are socialized by the age of 4. Almost all of them.
If their parents socialize them.
Or someone does.
Someone does, right.
Could be siblings, right? But someone has to socialize them. Maybe help them either control that aggression or integrate it. Better to integrate it. The kids who don't have that integrated by the age of 4, they're in for a pretty dismal ride. There isn't a lot of clinical evidence suggesting that if those traits are still in place at the age of 4, that they can be ameliorated at that point. And those are the kids that turn into bullies and then delinquents and then criminals.
And we see something very similar to that. And I wanted to ask you, because we see something else, and I'm curious what the literature says about this. It appears to us that the tribe in these systems, in this Tocquevillian society, will shape conscientiousness until about 13. And so there are some people that are naturally conscientious, and there are others it seems to shape. Our experience is when we take someone after the age of 13, if the culture is spun up, they will behave in a conscientious way. But without the culture, they will regress back to where they were.
Well, part of what happens at 13, okay, so imagine you have these aggressive kids, okay, at 4. Now they maintain a high level of aggressive behavior. Okay, now at about 14, the boys join them. Under the influence of testosterone. And then for the normal boys who have this spike in aggression, that start to decline pretty rapidly around 18, and then goes back down to where you'd expect it if you just tracked it linearly. Whereas the criminal types don't desist. What happens with the criminal types, generally speaking, is that they start to desist in their late 20s. And so the fundamental hard-headed penological theory for repeat offenders, 1% of the criminals commit 65% of the crimes. So for true repeat offenders is you just keep them in jail till they're 30. And then it might be delayed maturation, something like that,
But after that, they're not as big a threat.
They start being so incentivized.
But by the way, the thing we see over and over and over again, and I can't stress this enough, and I think it's my theory of why the United States works, is the 80-20 rule is one of the most powerful rules of Pareto. And so what you see is, if you believe every child's a genius, you find the child that's good at each of these different things, but they all have a place. Just like I can be a plumber, an airline pilot, I can be. But you see that in these societies as they grow.
You got to find your place in the. So the Pareto, this 80-20 rule, this is 20% of your customers produce 80% of your sales. 20% of the recording artists sell 80% of the records. 20% of the authors sell 80% of the books. The actual rule is the square root of the number of people doing a particular task perform half the labor. And so this drives inequality in every creative domain. But your point is there's a diverse enough range of potential Pareto contributions that doesn't matter. Like you can be an off-the-chart plumber and I can be an off-the-chart mathematician, and there's zero trouble with that.
If we're only going to measure how quickly I can memorize things for a test I'll never use again, and it's basically IQ, then there's only going to be one winner of that, or one group of winners. In this case, there's all sorts of ways you can win, and it's so complicated you can't even keep track. But what you can keep track of are these stories that are repeated over and over and over again about heroes don't win. When they get knocked down, they get back up. And it becomes kind of a grit, a resilience, hey, it's a challenge. We talk about, I may have gotten this from you, like what are the 3 monsters? The 3 monsters are resistance, distraction, and victimhood. It's like, if I can't, which one of those is standing in my way today? Resistance, I just need to take the first step. And
that might just be apprehension of sheer complexity, right?
But what do you do? Take a step, Distraction.
And if you can't, then take a smaller step.
Exactly. I mean, take one more step towards the elevator. And so distraction, it's what's valuable to you in focus. I mean, prioritize and focus. If it's victimhood, then gratitude is the only substitute, is the only elixir for victimhood. And so they learn
those. And we should also point out on that regard that gratitude isn't the naive insistence that the world is a perfectly delightful place and that everything is going to go well. Gratitude is a practice. It's a moral virtue. And the the virtuous part of it is the courage to find in even the darkest place some light that can guide you through, right? And the willingness to do that, the understanding that that's a practice. I mean, when my wife was extraordinarily ill a few years ago, like fatally ill, so the story went. And one of the things she did that was of aid to her physically, because it helped her be less stressed, and that's good on the immunological front, but also spiritually, let's say, was to strive very diligently to look for what she could be grateful for in each day and even in each moment. And in her situation, I think this is very often the case for people who are facing very serious illness, she was grateful for the love and support of her family and her friends. And that was also genuine and also of genuine aid. But it's a courageous practice. It's not a kind of naivety.
And so if you're surrounded, though, by a group that understands if you're playing the part of the victim, they don't say, don't be a victim. They begin to ask you questions about gratitude and give you space, right? Sometimes you want to play the victim for a while.
Yeah, well, sometimes terrible things are happening to you,
Right.
too.
Sometimes, your life's just, and so then you get someone who's actually, I'm very empathetic that that's happening. I'm sympathetic to you that that's happening. But then the answer is, once you're finished with that, what are we going to get up and go do next? That's good for you, right? And we're going to have this moment. So just imagine all these young people. And by the way, the high schoolers are going up and down through the middle school and elementary all the time. The middle schoolers are going up and down. You'll see elementary students. So this is a family. This is like a neighborhood of young people moving around between studios, helping each other. Often you'll get a 10-year-old that's better at calculus than a high schooler.
Right.
And they're up, and it has to all be Socratic.
What a deal for the 10-year-old. He gets to share his knowledge with older kids.
We have 10-year-olds that actually sell tutoring services. So they have to be Socratic. They can't lecture.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the beauty, is they're learning how to build a society. They're learning self-management.
Yeah.
They're learning self-governance. They're learning how to treat other human beings.
Yeah.
And guess what? The learning's exploding. Oh, and by the way, they've had 6 or 7 apprenticeships in the world by the time they're in high school.
Yeah, and how do you set those up? And what do the apprenticeships look like?
It's the easiest and best thing we do. You go through a series of challenges of what you might want to do with your life, even at 11 or 12. Like, what's exciting? I want to be a vet.
Yeah.
I want to be. And so then you learn how to go find out the owner of the vet service. What have they done in their life that's valuable? Then you write an email that says, Mr. Smith, I've so admired your compassion with animals. I know that you won this award. It has to be genuine.
Right.
So
you show you've done your homework.
Yeah. But then the question is, I'm looking for this apprenticeship. I'm not asking you for it. I'm just asking, can I have a 5-minute phone call to explain it?
Right.
That's all I want.
Yeah.
So you get the phone call. You listen for objections and try to answer them.
Right, yeah.
And the only ask then is, can I have 2 minutes in person? You show up in person, and you imagine this 12-year-old that showed up ready, and they say, Dr. Peterson, would you give me a chance?
Yeah.
I'll show up early.
Yeah.
I'll work late.
Yeah.
I'll wash the floors. I'll do whatever you ask.
Yeah.
If I don't ever do one of those things, not only can you fire me immediately, but it's going to reflect on all my studio mates. They're going to find out. But if you'll give me a chance, I'll prove myself.
Yeah. An irresistible offer to most people.
The success rate on that is like 98%. Now,
No, that's interesting in and of itself, because we're constantly bombarded with this insistence, especially from the radical left, that the reason that you might employ someone is to skim off their excess labor, let's say, right? The Marxist theory of labor. And that it's basically an exploitative relationship. And you can be cynical about this. You say, well, no kidding, the businessmen are going to agree because now they've got free labor. But that isn't what happens. Like, what happens is that, and you have to be unbelievably cynical and blind and believe that the world is motivated by power to believe anything other than this, is that the ability to act as parent proxy is there in all of us, to the degree we can be parents. And it's extraordinarily attractive to offer people the opportunity to establish a relationship with someone who's young, where they're fostering their development. I think that's a primary source of human gratification.
Well, I actually think there's also something that's, I wouldn't call it cynical, but it's a little more self-interested, that the people who are being like very generous, because this is, it's hard to have an apprentice.
Yeah.
But we've seen this happen at the Acton MBA. I think they're looking up to you as the Wizard of Oz, and you're seeing in them a young you.
Right.
And there's this sense of, that reminds me of myself.
Yeah.
And, and that's
the best part of myself.
The best part of myself.
Yeah.
And in fact, if I had had this at that age.
Right.
And so I'm so attracted to this. But anyway, through this process, what do you learn how to do? You learn how to find something to do that matters in your life, serving someone else. And by the time you're
you also learn how to ask someone, you learn how to suggest in an attractive manner to someone how they might offer you an opportunity. This is one of the reasons it's so useful to teach your child, to help your child develop extremely polished manners.
Yeah.
And because what happens if you have well-mannered kids who say please and thank you and who know how to shake hands and introduce themselves and who are sensible enough to listen to an adult, then they will charm the adults, and not in an instrumental way, a manipulative way, but they'll charm the adults, and the adults will reveal the best part of them, and then they'll offer the kids all sorts of opportunities. And so what a deal that is for your kids.
And we see that just happen over and over. And what do we have to do? Nothing. We don't set these up. We don't matchmake. The young people go out and do it all with parental permission, and with the parents have to sign off it's safe. But they're out there doing. Our boys went through amazing. They ended up their final apprenticeships were at SpaceX.
Right.
And you know what? They did that on their own. I mean, that was
that's great too, because that makes it their accomplishment.
Oh, it's
that's
absolutely
another thing that's so useful about not doing too much for other people. Isn't it? So one of the things that, as a therapist, it's very easy to steal your client's success and to slough off their risk. So for example, if you come to me and say, well, do you have some advice on the career front? And I say, well, this is what I think you should do, and this is how I think you should do it. And you go out and you do it. It's like, it's not obvious at all whose victory that is.
Right.
And then if you go out and fail, well, I failed as a therapist, but not as much as you failed. So it's like your skin.
I'm going to claim the victories and
slough off the failures. Yeah.
Well, this is why, by the way, we don't ever talk about the success of our graduates, because it's their success. We just want to hear us talk about that. I mean, we just don't. It's their success, not ours to claim. And it also brings up the hardest thing we have. It's not the young people, it's the parents. And I asked our son the other day, a good friend was working on something about fatherhood. And I asked our youngest son,